Yeah. What you got? Single head like damn East Coast barbarian cat. Look like a baseball collector. That nigga damn house like a goddamn
reminds me of sitting in a mid-city LA on the porch of this house on Cambridge Street where Chris Portugal of People Under the Stairs lived, and smoking beaties and drinking 40s with Mike and Chris from People Under the Stairs in like 1999 and 2000. My very first time I ever went to Los Angeles, I stayed with Chris, my guest today on the 50th episode of the House List podcast. My name is Peter Agast, and I'm the host and producer of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We made it to 50 episodes. 50 episodes. And I really can't believe it, honestly. I definitely would have never thought that back in the day, hanging out with Mike and Chris, and crashing in Chris's various Fest 1, aka Fest 1, his various homes and apartments, living in LA as a native of Los Angeles, just like Mike. I stayed with those guys a lot over the years and partied a lot, and we did a lot of shows together because later I would become their booking agent. But back in the day, I was more like a journalist, documentarian type kid. I was really a kid. I don't even think I was 21. I definitely wasn't 21 when I went to LA and met them for the first time. I was probably 19, if I come to think of it. And yeah, I just remember those days like so vividly. It was just a different time, different era. And in fact, I can go back as far as remembering really the first time I ever heard People Under the Stairs as a group. It was when I actually was living in New York City, and this was around 1998 or early 1999. I think it was the summer of 1998. And I worked at Sandbox Automatic, which was like a primitive online record store. It was the first hip-hop online record store, if not the first retail online record store ever on the internet, run by Edward Wong, who's a great friend of mine, and gave me my first break, really, in a way. And I saw that record for The Next Step Part 2 come in, and it was like a random 12-inch. And just, I think I bought it, and I don't even remember if I listened to it right away or not. But I know that I would eventually write a review for the album The Next Step in Herb magazine by the time I moved across country to Portland, Oregon later that year. So somehow by stumbling across that record in the old Sandbox Automatic office, which was above Rock and Soul Records by Madison Square Garden, that's where I found it. And I think I automatically fell in love with the music. It just spoke to me like it has many other people I've seen over the years. And yeah, man, I just dug into it right away. And it's funny, that track I played at the intro of this is The Next Step Part 1, which is actually like a 10-minute song. And so I don't even know if that ever came out or if anyone's ever really heard it outside of, you know, those guys, Mike and Chris and their friends at the time, and the people that came in and out of that Cambridge Street house. And yeah, so I had to open that way because I think that embodies that group, People Under the Stairs, so well. Because if I could say anything about them, is that they're hilarious guys that have, they're just fucking funny as shit guys. And I love them. I love them to death. They're like my brothers. They're like my first friends I ever had in LA. And I've known them through every single album they've ever put out. And we've worked a lot together. In fact, the last time I saw them together was when I first started doing this podcast. I think I had just maybe recorded the first episode or something like that. I hadn't even posted it yet, but we did a couple shows in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle at Numos and Mississippi Studios. And Mocha Only opened up. And that's the last time I saw them together as a group. And they've only played 1 or 2 shows together since then. And I value every moment I've ever had with them too. So I don't want to get all sentimental, but listen, man, I can't help it. And it's the 50th episode of The Houseless, so I'm going to have to get a little sentimental today. I'm feeling a little sentimental. You know what I'm saying? Shit is crazy in the world. If you're going to feel sentimental, just feel it. Don't hold back. It's all good. No one's going to judge you. I'm not. That's for damn sure. All the type of shit I've been through in my life, man, I'm not going to judge anybody that's going through a hard time. I'll tell you that. And one thing I'll tell you too is I could not have done this podcast at all if it wasn't for the help and the patience of CJ Stewart. One of my best friends, lives in Humboldt, edits all these. We edit them together in this really archaic way, but we get it done every time. And he's been such a trooper, especially in August, where I've been putting out 2 episodes a week. I don't know why I even decided to do that, but I told myself I need to do that. I have to prove to myself that I can do this. I can pretend like I have advertisers that give me $10,000 an episode. Instead, I have none. But if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hit me up. Peter Agostin at agostinagency.com. You can do that. Trust me, I'll give you a fire sale right now if you hit me. Yeah, we got a great listenership, people all over the world. And I want to give all of you guys a big shout out. Because I know there's people that tune in, especially all my people in New York City. There's a lot of people, every episode, the most amount of people that listen is in Brooklyn, New York, where I live. So shout out to y'all. And usually the second most rated place too is Los Angeles. So to all my friends in LA and New York, thank you. But everyone else that tunes in, I cannot do it without y'all. And, you know, I never thought that I would really get into doing podcast shit either, you know. But I started in radio. I started in college radio at WUVT 90.7 FM in the town of Blacksburg and Virginia, that is. Not that fucking far from Charlottesville. And there's always been a rivalry between those 2 towns. I'll say that right now. But that shit was deplorable, straight up and down. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that because I'm already 7 minutes into this intro. And I'm going to have to tell you this right now. That's one episode for The Houseless. It's a 2-parter, straight up. So if you're a fan of People Under the Stairs, if you're a fan of Thess as a incredible producer, so underrated, I can't even begin to describe as far as sample-based production. He is just so slept on over the years, and the group as a whole. So we did too. I was in LA and I stayed with him for a couple of days and his beautiful family in San Pedro, and we talked a bunch. It was in 3 different settings. So boom, I got that for you. So episode 50 and probably 51. Straight up, I'm going to do back-to-back. It's going to probably be like that. We have a great conversation today, though. But before I kind of get into describing that a little bit, and we're going to get into this conversation quick, but I got to kind of set this thing up. Why I even did this podcast to begin with. Because when I got sick, and some of you may know this and some of you might not, but in the summer of 2014, in August 2014, I got really sick. I was on tour with a band that I used to work with that I haven't worked with in a long time since then. And we were in Brazil for a couple of shows, like sort of these festival-style shows in Fortaleza, Belém, the far-flung northern cities in Brazil. And I got super sick when I was there. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew that I was feeling really ill. and my symptoms were crazy and escalating very fast until I finally got back to New York, barely, and it was a painful adventure, to say the very least. And by the time I finally got into the hospital, I was told that my kidneys failed, or my kidneys were failing, or had failed. And I was so fucked up, my blood pressure was so high that my retinas had detached from my eyes. Now, I've told my friends this story a million times. I know it sounds brutal, and it felt brutal, because I was basically blind. I couldn't see for shit for months after. And I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. I was in ICU for a week. I started dialysis when I was in the hospital. I had multiple catheter operations. In fact, the first one was totally botched. It was a completely traumatic experience. But I had an amazing nephrologist, and some great, amazing nurses, and some really great friends and people that I love very much, that helped me get through this time. But I had a lot of time to lay in a hospital bed by myself, and I couldn't see for shit. So all I could do was think, and after maybe a week, I could hold the cell phone again. And I started listening to stuff, and it was hard for me to listen to music. I needed to listen to people talk and shit. So I started listening to podcasts when I was in the hospital, and I listened to basically 3. I listened to Mark Maron, Juan Epstein, and Yoni Wolf's The Wandering Wolf. Those are the 3 ones I listened to in the hospital, and then that would carry on into my time in dialysis as well. I listened to some Combat Jack as well. I mean, I'm a sucker for hip-hop interviews, and I have been for a million years, you know what I'm saying? But those first 3 really got me through it in a major way. And I just laid around. I couldn't move. I couldn't. I felt terrible. I almost died. And I don't know if you've ever spent any real time in a hospital, but the music that plays from that TV, there's this one channel that plays this sort of I guess it's supposed to be soothing, but it couldn't be more disturbing and macabre if they tried. I mean, and I had to block that shit out with podcasts and people talking and just conversations with people about life and shit. It got me through that, because then I was in dialysis at Irving Place, right above the venue, Irving Plaza, in a nondescript building, for 12 months until I had a transplant in July 2015. And my brother gave me his kidney. In fact, we were in a blood type match. We did something called the paired kidney exchange program, and he gave his to a man, an elderly man, and a woman in New York gave me hers. So, yeah, I don't mean to go long on this, but I spent a lot of time laid up, and when I could start walking again, I kept listening to interviews with people, and I just felt like sometime down the line, I'd love to be able to try to do this myself. I needed something to do. I couldn't write because I couldn't see. I could barely. Eventually, I would get back to booking shows, but a lot of people dropped me. A lot of people turned their back on me, and that's just the way the music industry goes. Trust me, I have 1,000,001 stories about how people turn their back on you when you're no longer of use to them. But I can tell you one thing: Mike and Chris, he's the guest, but people on the stairs have always been friends before anything. And I love those fucking guys, and they were there for me, and always have been. So I'm so grateful to be able to do the house list, to have people check it out, even if it's a couple of people, even if some of the episodes it's just I see, it's not a lot of people, but you'll go back. People will find some of these down the line, and listen, if you feel so inclined, tell a friend to check it out. That's it. Spread the word, because I do it for a labor of love. And, but anyway, I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't gone through such a traumatic experience. And I spent so much time alone, both in a hospital bed and then walking on these extremely long walks, and then running, and then stopping running and walking again. And, it's just a part of me. It's a part of my healing process and being able to reconnect with people, because I lost a lot of my social circle, because I don't go out like I used to, and all that. And I also couldn't have done this without Laura too. So if she's listening, she needs to know that too. And I just want to thank you guys. All right, so listen, let's get into this conversation. I have talked plenty. You guys know how much you mean to me, and hopefully you know how much this guest means to me too. It's a homie. It's my friend, Chris Portugal, Fest1 of People Under the Stairs. So many albums, so many tours and shows. Hopefully this will spark your interest to go back and listen to some of those stuff. And he just put out a great record, Fested, with DJ Day. Peep that out. And his record label, Peace Lock 70. We did the interview in his brick and mortar store that's in Torrance, California. That's sort of like half his record label, Peace Lock 70. Look it up if you're not hip. And then half Chemistry Surfboards, because Chris is also into, he sells, manufactures, and distributes surfboards, and he's a great surfer, and he's a great inspiration. All right, y'all. So this is a good bridge. Let's start my conversation with the one and only Fest1 on the 50th episode of The House List. Check it out, y'all. For me to try to find like a starting point talking to you is it's kind of tricky, because we can kind of pick up from what's happening like right now to what was going on when we first met or linked up, which was like in the late 90s. So and we'd already been talking for a while too. So, but I want to talk about, there's a lot of shit I like to try to talk about.
Do we have a time limit?
No, there's not. Right. No, there's not necessarily. No, we can go as long as possible.
As need be.
No, and it can be like I can split it up too.
I feel like this is like my exit interview. When like people leave a job and they're like, and they ask them they're like, so we just want you to sit down and tell us like how everything went.
How was your experience?
What was your experience like working in hip hop? Well, now that I'm retiring, I just want to make you guys aware of some things.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because you just put a record out.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're not really retired.
I'm not really retired. I don't think you ever really truly retire.
But you've always been like half retired anyway.
Yeah, I don't foresee myself going in the same way. Like I think I just you need to be flexible about and realistic about how you see yourself in relation to what's happening. And I think like for me, seeing like a lot of the older cats, some of them not aging very gracefully in hip hop.
Old heads.
It's like mortifying to see that. There's a handful of dudes who I do look at and I'm like, like you look at Master Ace, he's in good shape. I follow him on Instagram, he's in good shape. He's touring. Like I'm like, oh, that's inspiring, because that cat's like older than me. I looked up to him when I was a kid.
Sure. When we did that show in DC, he killed it.
He's ripping it, and also the fact that he's like taking good care of himself and like whatever, like that's an anomaly in hip hop and stuff. At the same time, me personally, like I don't foresee myself so committed that I can keep leaving my family and all this other stuff to go and do a tour through like Germany for like 6 days. Like the money's not there, and I honestly don't have the motivation to do it anymore.
Right.
And I worry that if I did do it, I wouldn't be as disciplined as Ace, and I wouldn't be able to take care of myself like that, and I would just basically, rot in some hotel room. Like
Yeah, it takes a lot of discipline. I think as you move further in your career too, you have to be even more disciplined than you ever were to make it worth your while. If anything, even profitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you guys were straight road warriors for 10 years straight, more than 10, really.
Yeah, I think for all practical purposes, we could say probably 20 at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
And then also, like, there's the whole, like, Groundhog Day effect where you keep playing the same venue for, like, the same... You keep playing the same cap room, and you get the festivals, but it's, like, after I played, and I like, for instance, like, I love the Fox Theater, but I probably played the Fox Theater in Boulder, 20 times, 11 times, 15... I don't know. It's a lot of times. And it's, like... it gets to the point where it's like it's a trip, and I never wanted to get off stage or get on stage and basically think like it's a chore, because I feel like that people that would translate to the audience, they would feel that. So when I started feeling like I didn't have the motivation to do it anymore, it scared me, and I'm like I better not go out there and do this, because it's already, my mind's already moved on, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even in the last couple of years, I mean, you guys have put out some of your greatest work, I feel like, too. I mean, but the thing is that what I love about People Under the Stairs specifically is just musically and like recording wise, you've always been so consistent and true kind of to like the very original, I guess, aesthetic too, and haven't made like weird and wild decisions, like weird aesthetic changes and shit like that, which I think is why like you guys especially are in this kind of interesting place where your fans somehow get younger and younger, and like you have this unique sort of group of people that love your music and stuff, and it's you know, I guess effectively it's aged well because of that, you know.
Yeah.
That's just my observation.
No, I mean we have some very dedicated. I mean, calling, you know, honestly, like it feels weird calling them fans, because after this long, we've actually gotten to know a lot of the people.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's like it's almost just like a bunch of homies around the world who are passionate about the stuff that Mike and I had made. I think at the same time, as time went on, even though we did have this amazing fan base, it was really hard, especially for me, because I had so much invested in the production and a lot of the creative decisions that, you know, it was hard not to get ass hurt about lack of recognition or, you know, like that was, you know, that was the first sort of thing that really started grind on me, you know, because
like in a broader sense of like the press and the
just everyone, like, you know, I mean, and it's stupid shit, like, and it seems really petty to even like admit this, you know, but like, you know, you follow someone on Instagram and they post up logos of like the most important rap groups, and you don't see your logo, and you go, well, that's some bullshit right there, you know. It's like,
true, yeah,
you know, like, and you look at the other groups on there, you go like, man, they haven't made half the albums we've made or whatever, and again, I mean, it's petty and it's like competitive and it's weird, but for me personally, like I was always trying to do something innovative and different, and I knew going into a lot of those decisions that people weren't going to appreciate it for what it was. Like, for instance,
really,
well, like take
because the music's so good, it doesn't come across like it's like you have like a total, like you're making it thinking that people aren't going to like it. It's like up tempo, it's engaging, and you know,
yeah, I mean, like,
rockers.
Well, like for instance, like I'm looking around the shop right now, like 12-step program.
Yes,
like
which is the 10th album from People Under the Stairs, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, yeah,
we count it as the 9th.
Okay,
Getting Off Stage we count as the technically 10, 11, and yeah, but so. Whatever it is, right?
Yeah, okay, I got you.
For people who are listening, it's the record with the television on the cover.
Yeah.
And, you know, I spent an enormous amount of time and money working with a jingle house in, like, Arkansas to do these jingles about, you know, to try and make sure that they sounded like Michael McDonald. It was supposed to be like a Doobie Brothers thing.
Yeah.
And I never, you know, I'm not gonna sit back and go like, well, people just didn't get it. Like they would, like, I didn't think anyone would get it anyways. Like that whole thing came from an inside joke, and it came from like me and Mike driving around Colorado listening to Michael McDonald, you know, obsessively. Peter, you've been privy to a lot of this shit.
Yeah.
But
some of the stuff mystifies me. I mean, even with that record, I don't really get like a lot of the inside jokes.
Right. And it's like, but like I never heard not once anybody in press or anyone else be like, man, that was so trippy how you guys had jingles. Like legit jingles on your record. Like how the fuck did, like no one was like, how the fuck did you do that? Or where'd you get that record?
Right.
No one cared. Everyone was just like, so then I started thinking like, man, I wonder if anyone's actually really listening to this in the same way that I listened to like 3 Feet High and Rising, and I tried really hard to figure out what was going on and how they did certain things, and you know, whether people were or they weren't. Once you have that seed in your head where you start wondering if people are actually, then it becomes harder to like get yourself up to do it again for the next record.
Yeah.
And
I get
so,
it. I get that. Yeah.
You know, so it's like, that's just one instance, but it's like after a lot of things like that, it became so difficult for me in the studio to keep doing stuff like that when I almost felt like a lot of it was just being lost on people anyways.
Right. So just to let me know too, because now you got me thinking about that record too, because we did a lot of touring around that album too. It was around 2013.
That was the
14.
last big People on the Stairs tour.
Yeah. So those skits were actually recorded by hired kind of guys in a recording studio.
Full studio session
and
hired.
Did you write the lines for them?
Yeah, and I had to, because of the way that company was structured, the jingle company, you're not supposed to take one of their jingles and release it.
Right.
So yeah, I couldn't call them up and be like, hey guys, I want you to do skits for my rap album.
Uh-huh.
So it had to be this whole thing where I had to come up with a radio station because they want to know. They're like, what radio station is this? Oh, I work for WRLA.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so that became the whole thing where actually WRLA is all over the record. We made a WRLA logo.
Yep.
It's on the back of the record. So, you know, like what started as like a kind of like a very innocent like inside joke, it like mushroomed into this giant thing of a fake radio station and skits and this whole thing. And I was emailing them as the program director from WRLA so that we could get these things. And you know, I told them that Mike and Chris had a self-help show.
Uh-huh.
And so we were like, yeah, we need a jingle for the Mike and Chris self-help show, and this is what we want to say, and here's the notes. And so they recorded it, and that's why the first skit, or one of the skits, is like they're like helping you get back on track, the 12-step program with Mike and Chris, and they were under the assumption that we were running some sort of like alcohol recovery type thing.
Yeah, 12-steppers.
12-step program. Yeah. And they wouldn't have done it unless it actually seemed authentic and legitimate. And I've never talked about this in an interview. No one's ever asked me about it. No one was ever like, so you guys have a Michael McDonald impersonator on your... You know what I mean? Like no one... Like it just seemed to go like right over everyone's heads. I remember when Carried Away came out.
Which was... That was like...
2009?
Yeah, okay.
We were in Brazil and we were touring, and Ohm released that record, and Ohm was soliciting it to press. And Ohm still had some long-standing connections with like press guys. Right. And they sent it to, what's that dude's name? Mosi
Reeves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he emailed them back and with the review. And I don't remember the exact review, but it basically was like, I really want to like these guys, but all the inside jokes and all the weird stuff, it just grinds on me, and I just can't stand these guys. Yeah. And this record makes no sense.
That's hilarious.
So, and I mean, something like that, you don't take it personally. You know what I mean? Because like at least he's honest. Like, he's being honest. I'm like, whatever. Like I actually respect the fact that he had that opinion. I would have been more, I think, bothered if he was like, yeah, like these guys are so funny, or like whatever. Right. He was just being honest. But at least he took the time to listen to it and was like, I don't understand what the hell these guys are talking about. That indicated to me that he actually listened to the record. Yeah. But when no one asked me about the Michael McDonald guy I'm like, damn, did anyone actually listen to this record?
Yeah. So what was the there's also another really running thing that I saw from that record, at least, that I saw when we were doing all those shows, which was the Looks Ready to Me thing.
Right.
That's on that record, right?
Yeah. That's
some mothership though.
Yeah, that's, I mean, you know, every time that we would sit down and make a record, Mike would basically bring to me a lot of stuff, or we would have running jokes, and we would try and incorporate them into like a bigger thread in the album. Yeah. So like on Carried Away, for instance, on every song on Carried Away, Ice-T says word.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
On every single song.
You figure out a way to work that into
every song, yeah. And it's either hidden or it's like really overt. Like I think at the end of My Boy D, it goes dun 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 dun. Then he goes word.
Right.
And
is it all from the same? Is it all the same?
It's all the same. It's all the same word. And if you ever play the Carried Away drinking game, which is in the gatefold vinyl,
yeah, it's actually like a board game.
It's a board game, and you're supposed to take a shot every time Ice-T says word.
Right.
So, you know, we never put that stuff in there because we were trying to be cute or whatever we've been accused of. Like we weren't doing it because we just want to be weird for the sake of being weird. It actually all related to some jokes that we had or something that was going on. And the Looks Ready to Me was, you know, that came out of. All right, so I'll go back.
You don't have to like demystify it too much if you don't want to, though.
No, I mean I won't say exactly what it is, but it's actually an interesting story that relates to some of your other podcasts, which is my buddy Pete Lyman, who mastered Carried Away. He's a good friend of people. He's a friend of People on Our Stairs, and he's a Grammy nominated mastering engineer. He's a solid dude.
So, an LA guy, or
yeah, he's an LA guy. He's a friend. Pete is a homie. He's an extended member of the family, and when I first started making dub plates, because you know we've been doing this since before Serato, so when we needed show vinyl instrumentals, we would go to Richard Simpson on Santa Monica Boulevard, and he would cut dub plates for us.
That's like a pressing plant, or it's a lacquer plate?
He basically had a lathe in a room off Santa Monica, and all the LA rappers would go there and get their dub plates cut. It was like $20, you know. Or if you were a DJ and you wanted to play Mr. Incognito at the club, and you didn't you had on, because like you could go there and make a record of it and then take it to the club that night and play it. So anyways, Richard Simpson ended up selling that lathe to Pete Lyman. So the lathe had a huge history that came along with it, of like LA like rap history.
Wow. Yeah.
And Pete got that lathe, and not only did Pete buy that lathe from Richard, but Richard trained Pete how to use the lathe. So when I met Pete and I found out that he had Richard Simpson's lathe, I basically said to Pete, look dude, like I want to learn how to cut vinyl. Like this, I'll come in and I'll work for free. And you know, this was like 2007 or 8. Like, I mean, we already had our thing going. It's just something that I felt compelled to do, and Pete was willing to teach me. And it was like to learn to cut vinyl on the same lathe that cut like Nonce records, or what, you know what I mean? That same lathe was used to cut, like, it came from like Macola, and it
really,
it cut like NWA records and stuff. So that lathe was like a living piece of history, and through its through its wires had traveled, you know, for the very first time, many classic LA.
Yeah.
So I was obsessed with the lathe, and I told Pete, look man, like I'll come in at night, you know, you show me how to use it. And the lathe was very manual. Like the newer lathes are very automated, so you basically start playing it, and the lathe makes decisions in terms of the pitch and the groove depth and all this sort of stuff. But that particular lathe, the way Richard operated it, was two hands, and you had to like turn the knobs and watch. And you know when it was time for a song break, you had to basically, you know, hit the lead screw and pull it down. And so learning to operate this thing was very mechanical. It was a very physical thing. So eventually I learned how to use it, and Pete was going on vacation, and so I offered to come in and cut records on it, actual commercial records that would go to pressing at Rainbow. And I was going to work the graveyard shift, so he would work until, you know, he had to leave, and then I would drive at like 10 p.m. and I had like a newborn baby or whatever, and I would leave and I would drive out to Alhambra and cut vinyl from like 10 p.m. to like 4 in the morning.
Wow.
And so I got out there, and it was like the second or third night I was working on and this was 2000. This was right after like Stepfather 2000. So they say this was like 2008, 2009, sometime around that time. Yeah. And I drove out there one night, and you know, it was probably 1 in the morning. I was drinking beer and I was cutting records. And we used to have these sheets, and it was like a PQ sheet. It would tell you like what the artist, the title, all this sort of stuff.
Right.
And you know, you would actually use a little scribe to write all that stuff in the runout groove. You would write you write the matrix number, you write the whatever, you know.
So what do you mean with a scribe? Like an actual, like a piece of metal or something?
Yeah, it's
or?
like it looks like a screwdriver without, and it's just sharp on one point.
Gotcha.
And you put this white triangular thing over the grooves of the record so you can rest your hand on it so that you don't fudge up what you just cut.
Yeah.
And it's got a little hole, and you would see through this little guide hole, you would see the run-out groove. So when you get to the end of the record, you hit the lock groove, and it goes into the center of the label, and then it locks. So in between those grooves, you had to write the matrix number and the side. So whatever, like if it was a Peace Talk record, our matrix numbers are 7,000 and up. So it would be like 7,017A on one side, 7,017B on the other side. And then sometimes some cutting engineers would do a little symbol so that you know who cut it.
Oh, nice.
Like
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Like a little hidden symbol.
Yeah, because you see some of those, when you're collecting records and stuff, you stare at these things and you try to sometimes you decipher them. Sometimes there's a message written in there.
Yeah, sometimes there's a message or whatever. All of the records I cut for People on the Stairs, I would write something. I would write I think on one of them I wrote Uncle Art, who was Mike's uncle or whatever. So
nice.
I also was like, I need to have a symbol. So I wanted to have a symbol for me if I cut it, and so it looks like a little pi symbol. It looks like a T, like a pi. It's like a TH for Thess, but it's like a little pi symbol. Anyways, so I'm sitting there cutting records and shit, and I put the next record on to cut it, and I line everything up. I look at the total runtime and the levels, and I start cutting it. I'm like, man, this whatever this is, like some bedroom shit. This is like some fucked up rock. Like I don't know what it is.
Okay.
And I get 3 songs into it, and I'm sitting there alone, and I'm just just bugging out of my head. I'm like, no idea. I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is insane. It was Ariel Pink's Worn Copy. I was cutting the vinyl for it.
Wow.
And I'd never heard Ariel Pink before.
Yeah. That's an interesting introduction.
I was sitting there, and I'm in there alone, and I'm cutting his vinyl, and I'm tripping. And I call Mike. I'm like, yo, I don't know. Look up Ariel Pink. I don't know what the fuck this shit. And so that, Mike and I at that point, then that particular record that I cut, has the drummer on it, which is one of my favorite Ariel Pink songs. But we both became huge Ariel Pink fans at that time. And then that led to looking into R. Stevie Moore and all that sort of stuff, right?
Sure.
So it basically opened up for People on the Stairs in terms of music we were into and being influenced by. It opened up this huge wormhole into a whole other genre that we were unfamiliar with. So, damn, I've totally...
Was Life in L.A. on Worn Copy? Do you know this song?
Yes.
Pink? Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah, I mean, a Worn Copy is still, not because I cut the vinyl, but it's still one of my favorite Ariel Pink records.
It's a pretty crazy album.
And if you think about the sound quality of how it sounds, and you imagine me sitting there in Alhambra in this basement, cutting the vinyl at 2 in the morning, I was tripping. I was just, I could not believe what I was hearing.
That's so bugged. So you cut the lacquers for it. That's what it was, right?
Yeah, I was cutting the lacquers for them to go into production.
Yeah. Wow. Is your signature, do you have a signature on that?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
So I was
cool.
tripping.
Yeah.
Anyways, that opening up that whole wormhole of home record, it was almost like we had found the People on our Stairs of the rock world.
Right.
And I was like, these dudes are like us, but they make weird indie rock, but it's inside jokes and it's home recording and so going into 12-step program, we were basically heavily influenced by that. We were combing all that sort of stuff. So that opening, the Looks Ready to Me and all that is related to R. Stevie Moore, Ariel Pink. It's basically a tip of the hat to that entire genre.
Huh.
Now, if anyone get it, probably not, I don't know, but it was important for us to sort of, as we started that record and that sort of new point in our career, to tip our hat to these guys that we just sort of became aware of.
Right.
And that was something that, as you know, we always took pretty seriously. We always tried to embed information in our music that might get people to go back and listen to, I don't know, Spider D or whatever it was.
Right, right. And both of you and Mike have pretty different tastes, but they intermingle pretty well. There's a good chemistry as far as what you guys are personally into, you know, and how you kind of, because there's a lot of stuff that especially when you first started, a lot of shared interests musically and stuff.
Totally. And people always assume that Mike is just into hip hop or whatever.
Oh yeah, not even.
They don't know that. They don't know that he was a huge Kiss fan, and
yeah, he's a big like rock. I mean, obviously funkadelic and
sure,
funk
and
in
funk,
general.
right?
Yeah.
And like
Mike's got great taste in music. Yeah, for sure.
And I don't listen to I if anything, especially nowadays, I listen to more rock than I do to anything. But when I get into the studio, I still make hip hop. It's just that I'm not sitting around listening to every new. Well, I do listen to.
You survey.
I survey it, but I would say that like currently, right now, like I'm more apt to listen to Andy Schroff or Mac DeMarco than a new hip hop record.
Right.
I'm still gonna make a hip hop record. It's just that I'm not sitting around listening to all the hip hop stuff.
Would you listen to your albums after you guys put them out? Like,
nah. It would take me. It would take me years to go back.
Right.
Because having been the producer of the vast majority of stuff and engineering it, all I heard were mistakes. That's all I ever hear when I hear the music. I just hear every engineering mistake. I hear every production mistake if there was one. And
engineering mistakes, like just how you mix certain things.
I'm like hear something. I'm like, fuck, the vocals could have been a little louder on this track or whatever. Yeah. And it basically doesn't allow me to ever enjoy anything we've ever done.
Right.
So because it's all and when we started making music, it was all very manual. And the next step was recorded on a cassette 4-track.
Oh,
the
nice.
entire record.
Yeah.
And then the following 2 or 3 records were recorded on ADAT 8 tracks, which were basically VHS tapes.
Right.
No editing. And then later on,
no editing meaning like you did the song and then that was it, and then it just got on the album. Right?
Yeah, no editing meaning that like the songs, the verses, music had to run contiguously. So if we were doing a verse and you messed up in the middle of your verse, you might be able to punch in, but you were most often better off taking it from the top.
Oh, just starting over.
And starting over. Yeah. And nailing the verse, front to back. Same thing with Mike doing cuts. He had to do an entire passage of cuts, start to back, which that was the most tricky thing because, he may get 3/4 of the way into like the most amazing cutting in a bridge and the record would skip.
Right. Yeah. That sucks.
And we would have to go back and like it would never come out like the same way. And in fact, a lot of, I would say, not a lot, but a fair amount of songs got ditched. A fair amount of ideas never came to fruition because we got so frustrated not being able to hit it that we just gave up.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
amazing.
Especially on those earlier albums, there's a lot of songs that didn't make the albums because there was some issue with them. Sometimes they'd see the light of day, like Cholo Dads ended up on Mike Nardone's We Came From Beyond comp. But
great song.
That song was supposed to be on OST, but there was an issue with what happened when we were recording it, and it technically was kind of an unfinished track.
Okay, gotcha.
And so when they came to us for the comp, we were like, yeah, you can.
Yeah, well, it works perfectly for a compilation.
Works good, yeah. But it didn't work into the record because there were just some ideas or issues that we couldn't get done.
Right.
So there's a lot, but then later on, Kurt Chemist taught me how to use Pro Tools. And
when did you start using Pro Tools? In the 90s, or did you?
No, it was late. In fact, it was 2000. I was living in Pedro at the time, so that would have been 2000 and after 2004. So it was probably 2005 or 6.
Okay.
All right. So it was. I got married and moved back to San Pedro in 2004.
And you're from San Pedro,
From San Pedro, yes. Yep. Born and raised.
Great slept on part of LA. In my opinion.
Minutemen, Mike Watt.
Yeah. And you, and that's about
and
it.
Me. Well, Blue claims to be from San Pedro.
Oh, word?
I don't know. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe I don't know. But I know that JDC Records was there, and they did like Ice-T's first albums and stuff.
Oh,
so
cool. I didn't know that.
Pedro has a pretty solid history both in hip hop and also in rock. I mean, the Minutemen,
of course,
and the Minutemen honestly influenced how we tour too. Like, it's a big part of People on the Stairs. And I remember, I made Mike sit down and watch the We Jam Econo documentary.
Hell yeah.
And it was very emotional. We're in a hotel room somewhere, and it's like I felt emotional about it because I looked up to those guys growing up. I remember when they would play at Ports of Call and they'd be around town and stuff.
Really?
But when Mike watched it, he identified with D Boon and Mike Watt and all that sort of stuff, and it was really cool for me to see him feel that connection through me or whatever. Anyway, so I moved back to Pedro in 2004, built a new studio in Pedro. It took about a year, and then probably a year later, so that would have been 2006, around that time, I had just finished Fly School Reunion for Giant Panda.
Giant Panda album,
produced that album, and done all the engineering and stuff. And Cut was working on the Audience's Listening album.
Okay.
And he came through to
Cut Chemist.
Cut Chemist.
Yeah.
And he came through to visit, and he brought Pro Tools with him somehow. And I had a computer somewhere, and he's like, "You got to see this shit." He's like, "Can't believe you're not using it." And he started showing me that you could like loop stuff and you could edit, and I just couldn't even wrap my head around it. I was like, I can't believe you guys have been using all this shit for like 4 or 5 years, and we've been recording on VHS tapes, Because like when we were doing OST in 2002, we were recording on VHS tapes, and everyone else was using Pro Tools.
Yeah, I mean, Pro Tools had already started.
Been around. Yeah, it'd been around for a long time, and I'm sitting there like, what, So it was he taught me how to use Pro Tools.
Oh, nice.
And he showed me, spent 4 hours walking me through it. And then that, of course, changed a lot for me, because then it was like, okay.
Did it make it easier, would you say?
It made a lot of stuff easier, but I had to be careful about... For me, when he showed me Pro Tools, I had to continue to remind myself to consider the possibilities, not how it would make my job easier, if that makes sense. So I didn't want to look at Pro Tools as being something that basically made it easier for us to do the same shit we'd been doing.
Right.
I looked at it and said, how can this allow us to do more ridiculous shit?
Right.
Like how can we get, a Michael McDonald jingle? It was more so a question of it opened this new door, and we were like, damn, now where can we go with this?
Yeah. Because we were talking earlier too about how with certain contemporary hip hop that is embodying some of the early aesthetics of the 90s and late 80s style of production, but the technology is so advanced, is kind of a weird facsimile of the older technology in a way. So you're missing, there's something missing there just because it's a different piece of machinery that you're it's a program as opposed to a hard piece of machinery.
Right, like making the Group Home album on 2-inch reels, 24 tracks or whatever, 16, whatever they were using, and having that sound and that, for lack of a better term, the quote unquote boom bap, that floored me as a kid, right?
Yeah.
But to make that same record on Pro Tools, it would not be the biggest, to use Reason to use the Renaissance or Machine and make that record is not the hugest accomplishment in the world
right
nowadays. But to do it then, and the way it was done with the amount of sort of just fucking balls to the wall, that shit blew me away. But if I were to hear it recorded digitally, kind of and edited, and they're like, hey, fucking Malachi, redo that, we're gonna edit this word out, and you know what I mean? It doesn't have, to me, it doesn't have the same sort of recklessness that abandon that is that made that hip hop feel so immediate and just potent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took a lot of time to make that stuff. Obviously Premiere's production and the cuts and all that stuff is very time consuming work. And you can tell it's very well made.
Right.
And made those two rappers, which at the time the critics really panned them as rappers, made them sound absolutely incredible. And,
it's you have to look at, and that was one of the things that when Mike and I met, that was a common bond for us, was that we both looked at hip hop as sort of we looked at the entirety of the song. So a lot of people around us were like, the beat nuts suck as rappers. I don't know why you guys are so into the beat nuts.
Right.
But the end result, the whole song, we would listen to and go this is what we want to make.
Yeah.
And Mike and I both started out as producers,
Right.
And when we met, we were producers, and the MCs that we were forced to deal with basically looked at their lyrics as being 95% of the song, and the beat being 5%. They would rap over anything, because the way they saw it, their potent ass scientific lyrics were what mattered.
Right.
And we were looking at it like the lyrics at best are 50% of what makes this a memorable song.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you feel underappreciated as a producer and the MCs don't get it, that's when we were kind of like, you know what, we'll just be like the Beat Nuts. We may not be the best rappers in the world, but at least we'll have control over the end result of the song.
Right.
And that's kind of what really, you know, started our career and shit. But
when I first met you, I remember there was this guy that you had recently somewhat recently did some records, some demos with. Smile Oak. What was this guy's story? Because he was like, when I met, he wasn't around.
Yeah, he was originally a member of People on the Stairs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but there was originally 3 of us.
So what was his story?
I went to school with him, and you know, he was around,
right?
But Mike and I really kind of, and he was a dope MC. I mean, he definitely had like flavor to him, you know. But like I was saying previously to this, like Mike and I had a different perspective on what making music meant. Like we more so just kind of looked at it like we just happened to be making hip hop, but we were focused on making songs and making beats and then writing lyrics to them that worked kind of together. Yeah. And so it made it really hard for us to work with anyone who didn't share that perspective. Like anyone who was just coming in with a hot verse didn't really work out. Yeah. And People on the Stairs, you know, land at the time.
Yeah, you guys kind of quickly clicked and figured out that you were committed.
Yeah, and I mean, like we were sitting around listening to everything from classic hip hop to, you know, ridiculous rock records to jazz records and kind of seeing some common thread through that whole thing, and we basically just wanted to be a part of that, you know. And honestly, we were heavily influenced by Gangstar and by the Beat Nuts and by Freestyle Fellowship and by all and in CMW and like all this stuff that we've talked about at length. Everyone knows who our influences are, but it's also important, I think, to note that we never tried to entirely like emulate those influences. We just try to like ingest them and do our own thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you can say anything about People on the Stairs, it's like you guys have always like been on your own path and did your own thing. You know, like whether there was resistance ever within the general community of hip hop or whatever.
Tons of resistance.
But you guys just always kind of just did your own thing. You kind of kept to yourselves, maybe, possibly, I don't know, but I don't know if that's like really the right way to say it. But
no, it is. I mean, when we came out, we weren't affiliated with any crew. No one co-signed us. We had no major label deal. We had no producers. Right. You know, we've never had any big guest on any record to this day. You know, it was always, if anyone ever ended up on a People on the Stairs song, it's because they happened to be sitting in the studio, and we're like, oh, you want to get on this? Like, because we felt bad or whatever.
Right.
So that, you know, I mean, I guess it's one thing that we can say about what we did. But what I was going to say about Pro Tools, right? When I saw what Pro Tools was doing, then I was kind of like, I don't even need to be in the studio with the studio. Like before Pro Tools, the studio was a rack and a console and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And then, you know, Cut Canvas brings Pro Tools to my house on like a laptop, and he's like, check this out. And I was like, oh, like I can record anywhere. So then that's when we started working on Fun DMC. Right. And Fun DMC was basically recorded in I would say a large portion of Fun DMC was recorded in a backyard off 52nd Street in Vermont.
Word?
Like live. And the other half was recorded in the studio, but we were constantly bringing stuff back from the live recordings. I was taking the possibilities that Pro Tools gave us, and we were becoming mobile with it, and we were doing our best to capture all these sounds and stuff in LA and try and bring it back. So
because you have that guy that was on the intro and sort of weaving through. What was that guy?
So that's Bluefoot and Rick. Right. And rest in peace to Rick. Bluefoot, still, of course, a huge part of People on the Stairs family, but like we would, Bluefoot would throw these sort of big, funk parties, and then I would show up with Pro Tools on a laptop, and I'd have my headphones, kind of what you're doing right now. Like we're sitting in my shop right now, but I was doing it and recording multi-track, just partying, clapping, and then bringing that stuff back and adding it into the song. So like there's certain songs on Fun DMC where all of the partying, not only is it live partying, but it's actually recorded in LA off 52nd in Vermont at like 7 p.m. on a Saturday night. Like, it's an actual party from South Central. You know what I mean? So those were like the possibilities we were starting to see. It was blowing my mind.
Yeah, that's dope. Yeah. That's cool. That's an amazing way. I didn't realize that's how you did that too.
Yeah. Like the song, like there's a song where I rap like all the ultimate breaks and beats on, I think it's called Ultimate 144 or whatever. And all of the clapping, all of the background party noises were done. Like, we had, 60 people in a backyard. Yeah. And we had the mics, and Jazzmac was helping hold the mic and this and that. And we were basically like, okay, let's go. And everyone just starts party.
Nice.
And and so, again, like, that's not something that really matters. People probably don't care. But it's what happened. You know what I mean? Like, that's, if you listen to the record, you can hear that. It's a real thing.
Well, and the people that were there, it matters the most, because the people that were a part of that and heard what it turned into was pretty incredible, personal feat, for the immediate kind of crew, because you guys have always had like this kind of extended family of a lot of friends around you too.
And we captured people who have now passed, and also, just, in hip hop, the idea of authenticity is always thrown around, and it's always like, the biggest deal or whatever. And so for us to be able to actually not simulate a party in a vocal booth by having 3 guys multi-track themselves clapping,
right,
but to actually, record the party and record everyone, and have the people we cared about and loved on the track, like, that was a huge deal. And that was something that Pro Tools allowed us to do by taking the studio out of the studio.
Right. I can remember parties that you used to have on Cambridge Street. Right. Which was a few years before that.
Right.
And which is also when I first really met you, was there. And I got some recordings of you guys on mini disc in your backyard that are pretty hilarious.
And they're real. Like, there's like
real.
A real value to that. You know what I mean? But we weren't able to actually make that part of a record until we weren't. It wasn't the intention either. We were just getting drunk in the backyard. Right. But once Pro Tools came along and we saw the possibilities of that, and laptops and whatever, like, then all of a sudden it was like, oh crap, we can actually take that Cambridge party vibe or whatever and actually record it. And so from a production standpoint, that became really exciting. Like, all those sort of things, like, we're moving away from VHS tapes, but we're gaining all this other stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't just move away from the VHS tapes and keep making the same old thing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a trip, too, to think back, if we can, step back even before or around the next step in that time, because that's when I first met you. I think first started communicating with you even before that CD came out.
Yeah.
Because I got the single when I worked at Sandbox in New York, when I was still living in New York, before I moved to the West Coast in 99 or 98, 99. So, it was Curious underground 12-inch of that era, because it was that, and then shortly after that was the Dr. Root 12-inch. Right. It was kind of around the similar time.
They were probably a couple months apart.
Yeah, the next step with For Everybody was the B-side, right?
Yeah, Richard Simpson cut that for us on that label.
Dope, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's what's up. Yeah, and then I was like, wow, this is cool. This is dope. It's like totally different,
Yeah.
But that was
it was the
era when every single was different.
It was so different that they wouldn't carry it at Fat Beats or like whatever. Like, it didn't fit into what everyone agreed was like how hip hop from LA should sound.
Yeah.
So we had it on consignment at Aaron's Records. We had it on consignment at Beat Non-Stop. We had an album release party for it at Beat Non-Stop. But
nice.
But the irony was that it became very apparent to us very quickly, to me and Mike, that that our style of hip hop was not welcome in LA.
Like pretty much from the very first record.
Very first record, everyone was, we would give it to our friends who were DJs, whatever, and nobody would play it.
Right.
The only person who played it was Rob One, rest in peace.
Yes.
He took it upon himself to play it on the Fly ID show and on some of the clubs he was doing in NoHo and other places and stuff. So,
what station was his show on? With Fly ID, do you remember that?
Oh God,
I'm not being a native of LA myself. I don't remember, but I know he did some pretty pivotal parties in LA, though. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, being a member of CBS and it's a hugely important thing, and that too relates back to kind of the Melrose scene and Beat Non-Stop, because CBS was big off in that area, And then, of
So
course...
for folks that like weren't around LA or Southern California at that time, what is that really quickly? That
Melrose?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, but what that scene even was.
So like Melrose Boulevard was basically where you could go, to get the hottest like new fashion or whatever.
Right.
Like, so if
it's like where Sporty LA was, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, all the shoes, all the girls, like everything kind of revolved around Melrose. And that's also where like Hex's like hip hop shop was back in the day.
Yeah.
So, one of the only places you could go to buy like fat caps, like legitimately buy like a fat cap or whatever, fat shoelaces, any sort of hip hop trend that you need to get, that was a good place to start. There were also certain record stores there that serviced the DJ community. We didn't have Amoeba at the time. So aside from Aaron's, which was, I say Melrose adjacent.
Right, it was. Yeah.
But aside from that, you had Beat Non-Stop. You had, there's a few others that I'm forgetting that were on Melrose. But
this is the time when people would shout that at their phone or whatever they're listening to. The record stores.
Yes, and
because this is also pre-Fat Beats in LA, obviously.
It is pre-Fat Beats in LA, and Beat Non-Stop had, it was a family that was running it, and Dusk was working at Beat Non-Stop.
Yeah, DJ Dusk.
So rest in peace. So I had known Dusk because Dusk and I actually were working together prior to that at Rhino in Westwood.
No way.
And so, yeah, that's a trip. In fact, that's where I met like Ozomali.
Right.
I remember we had an in-store, and Ozomali, and they were like, and it's like some new group called Ozomali, and all these dudes who kind of looked like me marched in, and there was no one in the in-store, and they all like marched in and around Rhino and Westwood and like whatever, and you really started to feel like you were part of this LA kind of music community, because there wasn't an internet to tell us about who was who. It was just kind of like you saw them at in-stores or whatever, and then of course it also gave us all hope, I think, that we could be different, because you had an Ozomali and you had you had The Good Life and you had Jurassic 5 and all these like different kind of things happening. And
did you hit those parties? Did you ever go to The Good Life or Project Blow? And of course, Unity was a really influential.
Unity was everything. Mike and I never missed the Unity.
So who'd you see at Unity? Just like really quickly, if you can remember, because it was artists from not just LA artists, it was national touring hip hop artists that went there too.
And there was the Loud Records connection with Bigga B and Mark Love DJing and stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's why we saw Wu-Tang Clan there like very soon, like immediately, if not soon, to quote them.
Wait, where was it located?
It would move.
Oh, it was a roving party.
It was a roving party. I mean, my favorite Unities were conducted at the SIR Theater in Hollywood. We had, I would say, my favorite Unity of all time, and this is all obviously up for discussion, but my favorite Unity I ever went to that probably had the biggest impact on me, and I don't know what year it was, but it was at the Musicians Union Hall in Hollywood, and it was Artifacts, Beatnuts, Common Sense, and
who else? Because that was a tour.
Organized Confusion.
Yeah, there you go.
And
amazing.
That was a 4-headliner tour.
Yeah.
And so Young Double K and Young Thes 1 and the rest of the crew, we all roll up there, and you had to be there. It was like if you were anyone, you were there that night. Like you missed that show, you were screwed.
Right.
Because Stress had just come out.
Wow.
Resurrection had just come out. I think Common was the headliner, and he was doing like Resurrection stuff.
Dope.
Anyway, so we're all there, and we get in the crowd, and we're just amped up. We're amped up.
Yeah.
And Mark Love, who was the DJ, and arguably again one of the biggest influences on People on the Stairs, and a really important part of I think Mike and I's upbringing and how we look at hip hop. So Mark Love's DJing, and there was these massive speakers, huge, like floor to ceiling. I mean, biggest, like the fucking like 12 feet of subs, and then like the top. I mean, the system was fucking massive in this hall, and there's 800-900 hip hop dudes in there, young guys. Like we're all amped up, we're ready to see a show, and Mark Love gets on the mic and he's like, all right, I know you guys ready to start the show. Yeah. It's like, all right, before we start the show though, Bigger B just slipped me a test pressing of something. I want you guys to hear. You guys let me know if you think it's gonna be good or not.
Right. Okay.
And so everyone's like, the crowd gets quiet, like, listen to play, you know? Just drops a needle. It's like, and everyone's just standing there like, fuck is this? No one knew. He didn't say what it was. We just hear the piano. Ooh, baby, I like it raw. And then the bass came in. Wow. And everyone's like, yo, is that the dude from Wu-Tang Clan?
Wow.
Ooh, baby, I like it raw. Shimmy, shimmy. And then it brings it back.
Oh, wow.
Fuck that. Who knows about fucking Wu-Tang Clan? How many of y'all know about Old Dirty fucking Bad?
Wow.
Now it's louder than it was the first time.
Oh,
and then the bass starts, boom. I mean, it was fucking madness. Like, rap dudes don't mosh, but it was, I mean, guys were grabbing, fucking throwing girls out the door. It was shit. It was as close to a riot. Wow. In a hip hop, I mean, from a record. Yeah. It's not like Old Dirty.
It was the first time they were hearing it, right?
No one had ever heard it before.
Wow.
It was like the first time that shit ever got played.
Wow.
So
incredible.
People were going fucking bananas.
Yeah.
Couldn't calm the crowd down. And they're like, nah, everyone chill, everyone chill, everyone chill. We got the opening act, they're ready to come out. New artists on Ruthless Records. And we're like, ooh, shit, this is going to be good, you know? At-Band Clan. Make some noise for At-Band Clan. So here comes fucking Will and them. And yeah. And they come out, and it was... Even if he hadn't played that record, it would have been tough. But like coming after...
to follow
that whole thing, the crowd was thoroughly fucking unenthused.
Wow.
And everyone started booing and throwing shit. And then I was like, oh, there's actually a real riot's gonna fucking start.
Yeah.
So they got off stage like super quick. Like I think they got like halfway through Puddles of H2O. And they fucking got off the stage. Right. And then a fucking like trap door. And again, I mean, I may be remembering this wrong, but in my mind, this is how shit went. I was probably high too. But this fucking trap door opened in the middle of the stage, and all this fog came out, and Pharoah Monch came out in a catcher's mitt, in a full catcher's, and they dropped in a baseball, like dressed like an umpire and a catcher, and they dropped Stress. And then it was like, then the night was back on. And then it was like, fuck, you know. And then in Artifacts, the wrong side of the tracks. And it was like...
Yeah, classic. That's amazing.
You know, and we were in the front row. And in fact,
yeah.
B Plus took photos that night. And there's in the book, It's Not About Salary, you can see our homeboy Props, Double K, myself, in the front row.
Really?
In that book, in the front row of that show. There's a picture from it in the book. And we're like 15.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah. Yeah, that's epic. And that was Unity, right? So that's
Unity. Yeah. Like that's one night at Unity, and and then that night was repeated over and over and over again. I mean, we went and saw Large Professor get super drunk and couldn't get through looking out the front door because he was so drunk on stage. And I guess there's some story behind that. I don't know what it is, but you know, for the record, that's what happened. We were there.
Right. Would you guys ever play? Did you ever play it?
So we did eventually, yeah. Later on, we did, and Bigga knew us, you know, from being around. Even though we were kind of younger and didn't have anyone vouching for us, we did make it to Unity as an opener. But you know, he brought Gangstar through.
Amazing.
We saw, you know, Gangstar in downtown, you know, in 1990, whatever, and Primo did all the cuts live.
Really?
Yeah. And then there was all like he pulled the records and was like doing like cuts for stuff live. And then of course there was like town politics that would go down there too. Like it was a big deal when Razkaz and Western Hemisphere and all them got in a big fight at Unity, and everyone was there and everyone saw it and were like, oh, what's going on with Raz?
So that happened at Unity.
Yeah.
Because I remember that was a big there was a big break.
Was a knockout. There was a break and
there was a stomping on a CD of some kind.
It all happened. All that stuff happened there. So anything that happened in the hip hop community was happening there.
Dope.
That's, you know, there's too many stories to list. But we had that, and we had Rap Sheet. There's a Rap Sheet convention. What happened in Hollywood? We'd always sneak into that and get passes.
Right.
And you know, there was the night that we smoked a blunt with Black Moon and what, and like just like.
Right.
random things that were like that became very much a part of like at our lowest moments when things got the most hard. Remembering those nights and remembering that scene, it made us want to accomplish the dream of being a hip hop star. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because when I first met you guys too, I mean, we were basically the same age, and we were like just young, adventurous kind of hip hop heads, that were, just cracking jokes and drinking beers and smoking beaties and shit like that. Yeah. And it was just, I knew that you guys, I think that's maybe why we connected so well back then too. It's just that like, it's just a like-minded thing, right. Like you guys were just down and funny cats, we
were the guys that did sneak, even, we were sneaking into shows. We were like, anytime Mark Love would see Mike or myself walk into Unity later on, like he'd be like, oh shit, these guys, because it was always like these fucking guys, like we were at every show, right. We were at every club, like everyone would be like, fuck, not these guys. Like, because it kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Like we were more fans than we were artists. Yeah. And even when we started touring internationally and shit, we would still fan out and like do stupid shit. Yeah. People would be like, dude, you guys need to act like fucking like, get it together, guys. And we're like, no, like we're still those people. We're still fucking huge rap fans.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to not to dwell on this because I want to talk about some other shit too. But I'm just remembering too because of coming to LA. I mean, we're in LA right now. We're at your store now, which is amazing. Basically in Torrance, right? Yeah. But whenever, and we've worked in a lot of different ways over the years, and first and foremost, I've always been a fan. But I remember those early years really following myself too, just because I mean, sometimes it's fun to be nostalgic about shit. You know what I'm saying? And during that time, sort of after the next step and into question the form of the answer, is like when I started filming you guys too, and I have a lot of footage of you guys too during that period of time. Right.
And we were performing for like 6 people. And
yes, with you and performing in just socks on stage, and and getting some of those songs like when they were made too. Trying to remember which one, because with the Culturama stuff too, like there was a pretty epic thing with you making the beat for Earth Travelers, I think,
which is like all over YouTube now.
I know, it's a trip. Yeah, people ripped a lot of stuff out those Culturama tapes. And I remember the very first time I ever came to Los Angeles was to visit you guys, was to crash at your place. And I think
was that when you gave Mike the edibles when we were watching
that was
the
like
Laker
maybe
game?
That was like the second or third time. Yeah, that was pretty hilarious too, because I think he got pretty lit off that. Right? I took him later when I was driving back up to Humboldt, which was a huge mistake.
Those things were super fucked up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, but I remember my first time coming to LA to link with you guys and to crash at your place in Mid-City, Midtown, on Cambridge. And I think you might have been at your lady's house when I got there because I drove. It's a long drive.
Yeah, you spent the night in your car.
Yeah, I slept.
Yeah, you slept.
I slept on Cambridge.
On Cambridge and Harvard.
Yes. Yeah. Which is just such a trip to think back. Like it's just kind of like. And I remember some dude like walked by looking in the window and shit, and I was just like just trying to get through the night, like until the next day. But I mean by that time. This is already like sort of era people in his stairs too.
Yeah, I mean things were starting to like kind of pick up, I guess.
Yeah, but what's funny is that like you even with the label stuff, you kind of still kept going in this very unique direction that other hip hop contemporaries at least weren't going towards.
And I mean we also were getting a lot of pushback too for doing that, even from the label, because they were like, look, if you could just get some features on your record, if you could just do this, if you could just do that, we would have a much easier time selling the record. And if we had a much easier time selling the record, you guys would make a lot more money, because back then if you had a hit 12-inch, you could sell 50,000 12 inches.
Yes.
Like you could go like I remember around that time Black on Both Sides or like the Rocket stuff.
Yeah.
Like those 12 inches were going platinum, like legit
Right.
platinum 12-inch rap, underground rap 12 inches.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because we were stubborn or dumb or just being us, but
Yeah.
we the harder people pushed on us to do that, to take it seriously, the less fucking seriously we took it.
Right. But you never, but like you kept kind of growing as a group, like in the meantime. Mm-hmm. So there's something to be said about that, that while you pushed back when people were trying to kind of sort of alter maybe what your original vision was, that didn't change the fact that people, regular, normal people that just buy records and buy CDs and buy tickets to shows and shit, kept supporting the group.
Well, that was the thing. I mean, that was the thing that really changed the trajectory of the group, and also, reinvigorated us because, like we were talking about earlier, when the first record came out, no one in LA wanted to play it.
Right.
No one wanted to book us. We didn't get asked to do any of the cool shit. We were the bad stepchildren of LA. Like, people would, it didn't fit what rap music at that time sounded like. And when Fat Beats came into LA, they became this, when they were up next to the X-Girl store, and they were up on way
upstairs.
Upstairs,
right?
yeah.
But was there 2 locations, or was there
just one back then?
Right.
And thank God, Silos, who was managing at the time, he took our record in on consignment. But Fat Beats didn't want it, and at the time, it basically became like I was both Mike and I. Me personally, I was just like, man, fuck these dudes. Like, who the fuck do these people think they are? They're coming in to LA. These other record stores are going out of business, and they're trying to dictate what rap music sounds like. Like, if you don't sound like you're biting Premier,
right,
you're not allowed to sell records in the store. Like, that's ridiculous. And it being, in my 20s, my early 20s or whatever, it fired me up.
Right.
And that firing up was what led to OST. Because after 2 albums of getting shitted on by all these people, I was like, well, you know what? If you don't like our sound, I'm gonna basically distill it down to its most potent form.
Right.
And if you don't like these jazz loops and you don't like these drums and this and that, then get a load of this shit.
Right.
And then we came out with OST, and we also came out swinging in all the interludes and whatever, and that just and actually
came out clowning on some of the
things. and then Fat Beats told Ohm, Fat Beats heard it, and they were like, not only will we not carry this record, but they were basically like, these guys will never fucking sell a record at any one of our shops. Anyone would just be like, they were basically like, oh, these guys think they're fucking cute, fuck these dudes.
Right.
And at the, we didn't, because there was no internet, whatever, there was no immediate feedback to us about OST.
Right.
So if you had asked me a month or 2 after OST came out, do people like this record? I would have been like, I don't think so. No, I think the record's a failure. It wasn't until years later, we were touring and shit, and people were like, OST, they were all over OST, and I'm like, wait, people actually like that record?
Yeah, well, one.
I mean, what?
But in the canon of your records, obviously, it's the most popular.
I think so.
Most
Yeah,
successful.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, but it's the record that had the least immediate feedback.
Right.
And this is coming from a group that was used to negative feedback. I mean, negative feedback was what we got. When Ohm serviced Youth Explosion, they sent it to DJ Vadim, and DJ Vadim wrote a personal letter back to Ohm. It was basically like, Chris, the owner, he's like, Chris, I've known you, and again, he can deny he wrote this, but I saw the letter. This is actual fact. He was like, Chris, I've known you for a long time. Mushroom Jazz is a great compilation, blah, blah, blah. Signing people on stairs is the biggest mistake your label has ever made. If you want to get into hip-hop, you need to find groups that are way more talented than People on the Stairs. People on the Stairs is shit. They'll never get played in London, and blah, blah, blah. So we saw all this stuff. People would show it to us, or we would get it in our press reports or whatever.
Yeah.
And in part because I'm a real competitive person, it fired me up, but it also wore down on us.
Yeah, sure.
And I mean, like, the beginning, the intro to Question, the Form of an Answer is basically a bunch of people saying, like, who the fuck are these guys?
Right.
And that is exactly how we felt at the time. I mean, a lot of those things that are said in the intro to Question to Form and Answer are things people actually said to us. Yeah. Like someone actually said to me, "You'll never work in this town again," after we did a show, because the hip hop we were doing just didn't work. And so, like, you know, I can say, you know, as a mature person now in the industry or whatever, in retrospect, like, even though I wanted to act like it didn't affect us, it totally we internalized it, and then we lashed out, and it was like, some of it was real petty, like, but you can't keep hearing, like, you know, rock groups don't hear that. I don't know, like, I don't feel like other people had to deal with that shit, and we did.
Yeah, and if they did, they tried to be impervious about it, but I'm sure, hip-hop is, and especially of that era, because there was a lot of groups had a kind of uniform sound at a certain couple of years, you know.
Once Premiere started chopping up stuff and making 12 inches that were, and again, this is another term that we were told all the time, our records weren't DJ friendly.
Right, and that was like the era of the 12-inch with 12-inch style DJs.
And they're like, why can't you just make a DJ friendly 12-inch on your record with some nice popular, like, how come we can't put a sticker on your CD that says featuring this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy? How come you can't get some outside producers? And, you know, and we never did. And they were like, God, you know, you're making this really hard for yourselves.
Right.
All you got to do is just fall in line.
yeah, that's not really like something that you guys do, though. You know.
No,
that's a good thing.
It just made us more like a couple of little babies that we are. We became more weird and more inside jokey and more FU, you know.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we saw people that we looked up to who did that, like De La, go the opposite direction. Like AOI came out and we were like, oh, what is this? Yeah. Like, what happened to the jokes and the weird, you know? And I mean, really, what we didn't realize at the time was that it was because Prince Paul.
Yes. I mean, I mean, I think, those first three albums definitely.
Right.
The humor is their chemistry all together.
Right.
But, I mean, they obviously changed when Prince Paul no longer was a part of it.
You know, but like from our perspective, at that time, you're looking around you and you're basically seeing the entire thing become homogenized.
Right.
And you're going like, there's no more Biz Markie, there's no more characters, there's no weirdness. It's all DJ friendly drama stabs and you know, we still cared enough about hip hop to try and go against it, I guess. Yeah. And make a really good record. And that's what OST was. OST was basically like, that was like my opportunity to say, this is the best in this field, in this style of music. This is what I can do.
Yeah, it's a fantastic record, man. Yeah, and when you see when you guys do those shows and how you close with some of those songs.
Right.
I mean, Acid Raindrops is like a gigantic closer, show closer.
San Francisco Nights, which is it's still like I mean, it's funny because that was like, you know,
that's kind of almost like, not to interrupt you, but that's like an incredible encore.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, you know,
that's a trip though. So I want to talk about that San Francisco Nights. So
I mean, there's like 6 or 7 songs. This is the other problem with touring now, is that Mike and I, we have a handful of songs, half dozen songs that we have to do at the show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like
if we don't do those songs, people are going to leave the show and go, well, they didn't do, you know, this song. You get to the point where you have so many of those songs that every show has to be exactly the same, because there's only one way to get in and out of San Francisco Nights, Acid Raindrops, Trippin' at the Disco. You know, like, we got to do all these songs.
Yeah.
And so it gets to the point where it's like, well, we can't even deviate. People be like, do July 3rd. I'm like, dude, we can't do July 3rd. It's depressing. It's slow. And you're the only dude who wants to hear that.
Right.
We have to do Acid Raindrops, San Francisco. You know what I mean? And I don't know if other groups deal with that too, but like that also became a reality of our touring, where we had to, you know.
Well, it's a testament to a bunch of good songs that people want to hear. They're all great songs live, like Beer. I mean, it's a great, it's a great part of the
Beer, Trippin' at the Disco. Like those are all, you know, for better or for worse, the songs that we have to do.
Yeah,
and
you got to give the people what they want to.
I
would love to see July 3rd live as well. I don't think I ever saw it.
We've done it like once or twice. It's boring. It's depressing.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Okay, well, we talked about, you know, I know we're kind of sort of bouncing around from album to album, and when I was thinking of doing this, I didn't necessarily want to like dig into every album.
I know.
But it's kind of hard not to talk about it because I've seen you guys kind of,
Right.
Your career has had like many little paths and switchbacks and all that. But I wanted to talk about Stepfather just because.
And I'd like to point out, like, a lot of people don't ask about this stuff because they don't have the knowledge of us as a group, or, you know, they read something on Wikipedia and they're basically like, the questions they ask us in a podcast or in an interview are basically like,
They're based off some weird
they're
misinformation.
So tell me about, you know, and I'm like, tell me about touring with De La Soul. I'm like, oh, that never actually, we didn't really actually tour with him. We did some show, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So, you know, the way that we're going about this, the questions you're asking, they work, I think, well in terms of my exit interview.
Yes, and it's for the heads too, because I
Yeah,
know there's a lot of
for the
people that
heads.
don't have access to asking you questions.
Right.
And I've been next to you at that merch table after the shows and shit.
Yeah.
You can't be having 30-minute conversations with every single
No.
person in the room, you know.
No. And
So-
I mean, the only person, you know, who asked those questions or who was able to serve as a conduit for the fans was Pat. And now that he's not here, there's probably still a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah. So we're doing it for him.
We're doing it for Pat.
for sure. So I feel like Stepfather sort of represented the group at a very particular time too, because it's post Ohm Records era, which was a kind of an interesting era for you guys too, because it was a non-hip hop label, a San Francisco based label that was mostly known for lighthearted house music
Right.
and compilations,
Right.
And then something you guys moved away from that label. More or
Yeah,
less,
so like OST comes out and Mike and I get zero feedback as to anyone liking it, caring about it. I mean, there was just no immediate feedback other than the fact that Fat B said they wouldn't sell it and that everyone was mad at us. That was all I got, you know. And Rocka threatened to throw a chair at me at our album release party for OST, and you know, everyone's mad. People on the stairs like, how dare they do this?
right?
God damn it, hip hop, serious business. How dare you make jokes?
Right.
That was seriously. It would be like, people were like, I can't fucking believe that you guys think this shit is a joke. This is fucking hip hop, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
Joke?
the attitude. This is not a joke. This is a culture. Okay. So after that, we were free from Ohm because we had a 3-album deal, and we could renew it, but we didn't.
Right.
And I think part of the reason we didn't was also because it felt like a fucking massive failure. OST did. People always ask, why is OST so hard to find on vinyl?
Right.
Because it was a massive failure when it came out. That's why. Because Fat Beast didn't sell it.
Right.
You couldn't find it.
Yeah.
You could get it from Sandbox, maybe. You could
Sure.
get it from a few other places. But
Yeah.
when you took those big cogs out of the distribution wheel,
Which people at that time were very reliant on.
very reliant. I mean, that meant that it wasn't available in Denver. That meant that it wasn't available in, Seattle or whatever. So
Right.
you just, that's why now people go, I don't understand why OST is so hard to find on vinyl if it's such a classic record.
Yeah.
Well, that's because when it came out, it wasn't classic. It was a pariah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So then
That's
what?
why there's not 50,000 copies of it floating around everywhere in used bins and
Yeah,
stuff.
but you better believe that there's much more of people streaming it to this day, because those
Right.
some of those records on that album are by far the most popular songs you guys ever made.
Right.
Probably.
But we didn't get that, so we didn't get that feedback.
Right,
so
right,
then,
right.
The question was, do we keep making records or do we not keep making records? And Owen was like, well, if you guys can do one more record, we can kind of end this whole era out.
Oh yes, slept on joint.
So I basically looked at Mike, and Mike was already starting to go in a different direction. He was starting to work on Brotherload stuff. I was working on other stuff because OST just felt like a huge letdown for us. And so I gave Ohm, a compilation of stuff that was made for OST that didn't come out. Plus, we did like 3 or 4 new tracks, and that was "Or Stay Tuned."
Yeah, which I love. That there's a couple joints in that I love. I love the drum box joint. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, drum box.
Because you had the LL, the shit that LL had.
the
What
LL.
was that sample? Do you know?
I don't even remember.
Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.
Yeah.
Also
and
nice and smooth.
Ashley's Roach clip.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And the whatever the drum machine that you use too for that.
And
and road beaters, I love that joint.
I think it's important. Like there's that when I listen to that record, I hear two things on there forming. Right, there's kind of a defeatist, not depressing, but there's definitely like a self-deprecating defeatist vibe on that record a little bit on some of the songs. And there's also like a burgeoning fuck off, like because I believed in OST as a record. Yeah. Mike believed in OST as a record. Like when we were making OST, I was like, "This is the shit." I was using new drum breaks that no one had ever used before, like Deralcha and like all these. I was finally becoming the old school rap head that I looked up to. I was like, dude, like I'm using drum breaks for the first time that no one's ever heard. We're doing these crazy flips of certain songs and whatever. Yeah. So so then on the tail of that, like going into Or Stay Tuned, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna flip fucking Bubblegum by Ninth Creation. I'm gonna flip it around because I'm so fucking technically good, and no one appreciates that shit anyways.
Right.
We're just gonna make some party rocking shit. We're gonna make drum box. Yeah. It's almost a semi joke at that point because it's the last record for the contract, and no one liked OST anyways, and everyone was like, "Fuck people on the stairs." But what came out of that record was it was kind of a freedom, and so we got rid of the record, we put it out. Didn't hear shit about that record. That record, if any record was in the wind, that record was like totally in the wind. Yeah. And then we kind of just chilled for a little while. And honestly, at that, there's been many points in People on the Stairs' career where it probably could have been the end. I won't say should have. I say could have been the end. That was definitely a clean stopping point where we could have faded away into obscurity. And
were you not doing shows at that period of time?
We stopped touring.
This is after Calicom. You did the Calicom thing, or that was later?
That was after Calicom.
And Deep Concentration. That was another one.
Yeah, that was a disaster. That tour.
I saw you in Seattle on that one. I remember.
What happened too was because we weren't getting any sort of run in the States, or I won't say respect, but basically we weren't feeling any sort of admiration or demand in the States. We were touring solely in Europe during that period of time. Right. And we were actually touring tough in Europe. We did Glastonbury in 2001. We did Reading. We did Leeds. We did big festivals before big festivals were a thing.
Right. Yeah.
Essentials Festival. We were doing all the big festivals. And on the tail end of that, we started doing club dates. And it got to a point where I was on stage in 2002 in Europe somewhere, and I remember looking around and looking at the crowd and going, these all seem like really nice people, but they could give a fuck about me or my music. They're here because on the flyer there's an American flag next to our name, and there's rappers, right? And 8 times out of 10 we're disappointing them because they heard that some rappers were coming to their town, and it's me and fucking the big homie on stage jumping around doing cuts and shit, and they're like, why don't you have towels on your head and basketball shorts, and why aren't you pouring Heineken on bitches? Like, what is this? This is not the American rappers we were promised. Yeah. So
this is something else.
So I told Ohm's trying to send us back over there, and I told Ohm, I don't want to tour Europe anymore. Fuck this. Fuck them. This is bullshit. I feel like I'm a fucking I feel like I'm like a caricature. Like, you know what I mean? Like it.
Well, touring Europe, sometimes it can really, it can wear an artist down hardcore,
And, it really bothered me that I wasn't connected. I mean, we're up there doing the LA song, and we're rapping about shit that if you lived in LA or in America at least, you would understand.
Right.
And they're just standing there like, what is this shit, And I was like...
Yeah.
I'm like, why am I here? I'm getting like 400 euros for this. Why am I even here? Right. So, we told Ohm at the time... I was adamant. I'm like, I'm not going back to Europe. Fuck that. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? You can't tour the States. I'm like, why not?
Meaning why?
Because we were getting, at that time we were getting, in the UK we were getting £1,000 or £2,000 a show, which was big money back then. And they're like, if you start touring the States, you're going to start from scratch. No rappers like you guys are touring the States. They go out on these bills like Calicom. Right. But no one's going out on their own. Yeah. And they were basically, what are you going to do? You're going to go fucking play in Milwaukee for $100? We're like, you know what, dude? Honestly, I'd rather play in Milwaukee for $100 than to get on stage in some fucking podunk German town for a bunch of people who don't give a shit and don't even know what I'm talking about and get €1,000. Like, I'd rather perform for Americans who understand my references and who are, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
for the hip hop dudes that are marooned in Cincinnati or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
They were like, well, we'll see what we can do. And at the time, Peter Schwartz was booking De La and booking all and that sort of thing.
Yeah, agency group.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Kiri at Ohm reached out to Peter Schwartz and was like, hey, do you want to pick up people upstairs for domestic touring? And they were like, huh? Who?
Who that?
Who that? And he had an assistant at the time, Mike Morey, who was building a roster, who was handling CaliCom and was building a roster of other underground hip-hop groups, probably because they wouldn't give him anyone else. And I remember thinking how grateful I was that I had been given this opportunity to have an American booking agent, and I didn't have to go back to Europe. I can actually start touring in the States. And then, of course, we started seeing the numbers, and it was like 250 a night, 200 a night. And that not only was that shitty for us, that was shitty for our booking agent too.
Sure.
He's busting ass on a 70-city tour, and he's getting what, $20 for booking us.
Right.
Nevertheless, it really meant a lot to me and Double K, and we said to ourselves, we need to make sure that we never double cross the people that are working on our behalf on this stuff. Like, we gotta make sure that we're loyal. And I didn't realize at the time that a lot of the underground hip hop dudes didn't understand that. So very quickly, we separated ourselves from the pack, and we started moving up in price. We went from $250 to $500. We became support. Not because we had good records, not because anyone gave a shit, but because we were out there. You can only play a certain city so many times before you're going to go up in value a little bit.
Sure.
If you give a good show.
Right.
It's like we're in Bozeman for the 4th time by 2004, and it's like now we're getting $600 instead of $150.
Right.
So now
you're developing history.
Yeah, exactly. And so now all of a sudden it's like everything's starting to change. We're like, holy shit! Like, we actually have a future touring in the States, and that combined with the fact that we were done with Or Stay Tuned, and we were just starting to do tours in the States. It was like we could have just stopped right there. We could have ended. Europe was done. We were getting $250, $300 a night, and spending almost all of it on hotels and gas and whatever. So we weren't making any money. We weren't getting money in royalties. And then this guy, Rock, came to us, and we had known him from the LA hip hop scene. And he was always kind of like a weird dude. And I didn't know this, but he was like a gambler. And he had a shop in the Valley.
Yeah, he had a record store.
A record store. And he was like, I'm starting a label, Basement Records. And I want to make People on the Stairs. I want to put People on the Stairs on. Give you guys an advance. You got your booking agent. Let's swing the bat. Let's go. Looked at Mike. Figured we're young. Let's do it.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, we had one foot out the door, and now we're back in it full. Like, now we're like, all right, we're making another record.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So what's it going to be? Because now we're touring the States. So my perspective, like, when we were touring Europe, we would hear all the hot hip-hop 12-inches every night. Like, you're backstage, you hear the hot hip-hop 12-inch. Now we're touring the States, and you don't hear that stuff. Like, we're like opening for random people, and we're showing up at colleges, and it's like, start feeling like, damn, well, we can do like kind of whatever the hell we want, because OST was a flop, or Stay Tuned was a flop. And Mike, I would talk with Mike and be like, look, I don't want to make another OST. I don't feel like I can make another record that is that good of sample-based jazz hip-hop. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah, you did
Europe's over, OST's over, this chapter is closed. Where we are now, I have no idea, but it's not that. So going into the production for Stepfather, we already had the inside joke that I'm trying, but the kids don't listen. That was the theory behind Stepfather.
Right.
Because we already started feeling like we were aging out of hip-hop. So Mike was, called in George Clinton, and we made that record. And I went out of my way to not sample any jazz stuff on that record. Like, that was like a big turning point where I'm like, I'm not going to do an OST. It's going to sound totally different. And honestly, I feel like some of the stuff on that record, in retrospect, was way ahead of its time. Like, Past the 40 sounds like a very current record in 2017.
Yeah, it does. It's funny. Yeah, that has some pretty interesting aesthetics if you go back to it. Yeah.
At the time,
the sequencing, drum programming.
Yeah, the drum programming, the sequence. At the time, though, it sounded like nothing. I mean, we turned in the record. So we finished the record, we turned it in. Rock gets the record, and he's basically like, "What the fuck is this?" And he had a business partner, and his business partner was like, "You guys gotta like." Oh God! You guys got to get some features on here. Like, what is this? You know, we're like, we have a feature of George Clinton. Like, doesn't get bigger than. We're like, no, like.
Well, that was when George Clinton wasn't like he was
in the wind, and they're like, can't you get like Merce on it or something? We're like, no, this is the record. Kid Lex is on it, and George is on it, and I thought it was a really good record. We were obsessed with Fly By Night at the time.
Of course, for people that don't know this incredible cinematic experience, Fly By Night.
I think it's the most important rap movie ever made, next to Beat Street.
Absolutely. As far as a cinematic movie that's not a documentary, that's a story-based film,
right, that
involves hip hop. Fly By Night.
It involves a very precarious time in hip hop. And
yes, maybe the very early 90s.
The thing that me, like, personally, I love most about Fly By Night is it's so sincere in its delivery.
Yes,
like, it's
extremely. It's almost serious.
It's dead serious. And KRS-One was the creative director. Like, he's credited as being the sort of like cultural, god of the movie. Right. And it's so, it's so funny to me to imagine them sort of brainstorming this record and going like, we need the lead character to be like a Rakim mixed with like this, mixed with this. And he becomes that guy.
Yeah.
And it's such a fucking joke, But it's amazing because it's such a mockery of hip hop. But it's also so relatable at times because hip hop is so funny, anyways.
Yeah, and people's personalities they're just like that. They're over the top.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that not to go back to OST, but that was the thing that we felt very early on is that as much as Mike and I, and don't get me wrong, we genuinely love hip hop culture. Like,
I know
anyone who ever thinks otherwise they're full of shit. They're fooling themselves because we know more about
I've driven in the car with you guys enough.
There's no question that we love it, but we also love it so much that we can laugh at it.
Of course.
And anyone who thinks that it's not fucking ridiculous that Houdini wears leather fucking shorts is fooling. You know what I mean? Like, and that's not to say Houdini is an important part of hip hop, but come on, guys, these guys are wearing fucking wife beaters and leather shorts. Right. And sombreros made of leather. Like, this is hip hop. Dr. Dre wearing lace and spandex. Right. This is hip hop. It's if you can't laugh at this shit, then you really need to rethink. I think your involvement in it. And this is also one of the reasons why, not to fast forward all the way to the current day, but I really don't have any patience or tolerance for this culture anymore because it's so over the top, it's so ridiculous, and everyone seems to be taking it so serious.
Yeah.
That it's almost like it's not acceptable to even be critical or laugh. I mean, people are critical of it, but no one just sits back and laughs at it.
No, they usually get very offended if you try to give them any kind of criticism, constructive or otherwise, too.
Right.
People are very sensitive.
Very sensitive about hip hop, especially now because because the quote unquote culture and the quote unquote elements have been like marginalized by like Lil Yachty or whatever. So they're like, we're fucking under attack now, bro. How dare you think, real hip hop is under attack and and the elements and this and that. And it's not that fucking serious. It never was. Biz recognized that. And Biz made a record called Pickin' Boogers,
Right. I mean, even one of the greatest rappers of all time, like Big Daddy Kane, he had like
Big Daddy Kane had a spread in Playgirl eating chocolate with his asshole out. This is hip hop, guys. Like, you can't take one and leave the other.
Right.
If you're gonna fucking parade hip hop around as some sort of call to arms for realness and shit, you also have to accept the fact that the Fat Boys like to eat a lot of fucking pepperoni pizza.
Yes.
And they make great fucking hip hop records.
True.
Fat Boys were dope as shit.
Yeah.
Chub Rock is dope as shit. Anyone who says anything bad about Chub Rock, I get very, So it's like, now at this point, it's almost like people want to pick and choose what parts of hip-hop history and make it, part of what it is. But I'm getting on a tirade about it.
So Stepfather, though.
Stepfather. So we delivered a record that really represented us in the moment. Things we were into, which was Fly By Night, which is totally fucking ridiculous, but it's ridiculous because Scratch's routine in Fly By Night is dope.
DJ Scratch.
Yeah, Scratch's routine Fly By Night is the classic Freddie, routine. If we make fun of Fly By Night, we're not making fun of DJ Scratch.
No.
Right? It's just the movie.
But it's the written dialogue.
The movie is ridiculous.
Right.
And there's so many classic lines in there about Public Enemy works for the Japanese and like all that. All the, like all the things they're trying to tackle in that movie. So
what was the rapper's name?
The King and I.
Yes, the King.
He said, "I decide tonight I'm going to hunt some trim. I see a hoe and go over to her, thinking to myself just how I'm a screw. She says you're dirty. Wait, she says you're flirty. I say you're dirty. She sees her knees about to get dirty," or something like that. He said, "I am not a member of the human race. I barely even see your face." And it was supposed to be like his hardcore hip hop line.
Yeah, like that was gonna wow the crowd. Win him over.
And then there's like this whole social thing where whatever. The fact of the matter is that we were liberated from OST and all this sort of stuff, and we were watching Fly By Night and the ridiculousness of our situation. Yeah. Doing shows for $175 a night in Kansas, and Fly By Night, and all of a sudden the whole thing became really absurd.
Yeah.
And so going into Stepfather, like we just embraced that, like I think on the song, I think it's called Pumpin' or Pump, like whatever. Yeah. Like it was just like in the movie Fly By Night. There's this one of our favorite moments is I leans forward and he goes, "That shit was pumping." And so
it's probably the only time people has ever used that as a term.
Yeah,
right.
And then he was like, but like there was a caveat. He's like, "That shit was pumping," but, and so we decided to make a song that was basically all about the word pumping.
Right.
And we pulled all this. It was an exercise in absurdity.
Yeah.
The whole record. The whole record was like, we were having a great time doing it. We were having a blast. We were making good music. But we were also seeing how absurd we could be.
Yeah, because what's the LA song, like number 9 or something like that?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah.
And here's something that people may not know, but if you go back, you can verify it. Every single scratch on Stepfather is a female MC.
Is it?
Yes.
Wow, that's hilarious.
This shit is
all that a conscious decision?
Yeah, it's all intentional.
Yeah.
I had a chalkboard in the studio and it's like we were connecting all these ridiculous dots. Like, what if every single scratch were ridiculous independent female MCs from like the late 80s? What if we could do that?
What's the song that's on the tip of my tongue that I'm serious. I had it.
I'm serious. Oh God, that was a 12-inch Mike had. Mike's. It was his uncle was a radio pool guy, and he had all these like. It's like I'm serious.
I thought up to my neck. Or something like that.
Yeah. So if you go back and you listen to the record, if not all, and this is before Serato.
Oh yeah.
So we had a crate in the studio of Latifah, Light. Roxanne, like we had all these female MC scratches lined up, and that was not something that when we did our press junket for the record, we didn't talk about it. It wasn't in the white sheet for the record.
Oh, this is the first time I heard of that. That's hilarious. I mean, it's funny because there's definitely recognizable female rapper like scratches and samples in there. Mm-hmm. But I never put the equation together as a whole album. That's all that you use.
Right. I mean, and again, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
In really ridiculous, ambitious ideas we had that we buried in these records that no one asked about ever. I mean, this is the first time I've probably ever talked about it. Right?
That's hilarious.
But it's still this is still a fact. Like when you listen to that record, it's all female MCs. So whether people cared or not, we were basically trying to walk as far out on the limb as we could.
Yeah.
And we realized we could get away with it. We turned the record in. Rock had a fit. He's like, this is not at all what I was expecting. He wanted an OST.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, and I wouldn't budge. They're like, well, the record's too long. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's a lot of songs on that.
It's 20 songs. It's like 84 minutes. And there's interludes. It's an enormous record, and then they go, okay, well, we argued about it, and then finally I had to point out to them that in the contract, now I have savvy about contracts. So in the contract, I had full creative control. So I had to remind them, I'm like, we could turn in a fucking gospel record. You guys can't say shit. This is the record. Stepfather's 20 tracks of ridiculousness. Nothing gets edited. It's all there. All right, fine. They're like, we're going to start working on the cover art. I was like, oh, actually, you're not going to start working on the cover art. It says in the contract, we do the cover art too. And they were like, all right, well, can you make sure that there's like at least a turntable or a microphone on the cover? and because they said that, I was like, oh, yeah, no doubt. And my man Josh Dunn.
Oh, yes. Shouts to Josh Dunn.
Shout out to Josh Dunn. Who is now a Starving Artist crew, and we had the Detroit connection. I hit him up, and I was like, okay. He was working with a partner at the time. They were called Thousand Limousines. I was like, okay. I have a job for you. And this is a huge job, because we're going to make a rap record cover, but it has to look like a private, shitty record from the Midwest. Cannot look because rock...
It definitely doesn't look like a rap album.
Because Rock in the Basement had leaned on me. It had like basically riled me up to make this shit as least looking. So the art direction I gave Josh was basically like, has to look like a private record, can't look like a fucking rap record at all. And I'd love to do a thing where I want to put like a phone number on it somehow, and I'll buy the number, I'll buy the line. And if you call the line, you'll get like a message, like a secret message. But it can't be overt. It can't be like, call the hotline. Like the Hyro hotline. It had to be like something. So they did the poster and the art, and that was 2005 or when they did
something like that. Yeah.
So it was harder to do stuff like that back then. They did beautiful poster, like folded out. And then we did the DVD.
All right.
We were doing this because Rock had said, they hadn't given us a limit. Like before with Ohm, it was like we were just going to do like a jewel case.
Yeah.
But again, we were knee deep in this how absurd can we make this record? So any idea we got, we like ran with it all the way. We're like, yeah, we should do a fucking DVD too. It's going to be a CD, a DVD, a poster. And Rock's like, this record's going to cost me $12 to make, and we're like, yeah, sorry, dude. Like, you signed a contract that said we could do whatever we want. And so we just kept adding stuff onto it. So then we did the DVD, and we did all that sort of stuff.
Which was the making of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the cool thing about it, was that, like, because we didn't care anymore, because we were in this weird limbo state, we basically just made the most ridiculous record we could. With fly-by-night references and a DVD and a poster and a phone number, and I mean it was everything.
Did people call the number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. It might be in here somewhere. I still to this day have a manila envelope that says Stepchildren on it.
Uh-huh.
And it's a bunch of people who wrote into the address that was on the back of the thing.
Wow.
Probably have like 70 letters that people wrote in, and they sent $1 in a self-addressed stamped envelope, because that's what it said to do.
Did they get anything?
No. But I didn't think anyone would ever do it.
Yeah.
So, once that whole thing went, and then the record came out and actually did pretty good.
Yeah.
It like charted on Billboard. I was like, holy shit. You mean to tell me that like none of this, like whether we're cool in the LA hip hop scene matters, that whether, like, I was like, wow, we can actually do this. And we had some sensitive songs on there, and it resonated with people, and we were basically just being true to ourselves at that point. So that really changed the direction of people on our stairs, because then we're like, man, we can do what we want to do, and people will get behind it.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't even have to try to sell it in fat beats anymore. Like, we can just do whatever the fuck we want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting to go back to that, and with that in mind, because it does end on a kind of a pretty serious note too, if I'm not mistaken. And I love You. That song, that was my
Right.
joint on the record too.
Right. I think the last song is On and On.
Okay, yeah.
And-
That's a great song too, yeah.
But like every song, every last song on all those records, it always felt like it was going to be the last song we ever made.
Right.
So even with OST, it was like when we did the last song on OST, like we got into this tradition of like the last song had to feel really epic.
Yeah.
Because it always felt like we never knew what was going to happen with the career. So Stepfather came out. It did pretty good. I think it sold like 5,000 the first week or whatever. And so Rock was actually pretty happy, you know. And then they reported those numbers back to Mike Morey. And next thing we know, we're touring the States. And we're doing a headline tour for Stepfather.
Right.
Which was trippy. We're like, oh, all of a sudden now we're actually starting to like pick up steam in the United States. And we're building a history in all these different cities. And we never even went to Europe to tour it.
Interesting.
Which was insane because all the other rappers were going out to Europe.
Right.
So we started becoming a vehicle in terms of touring the United States. We became like our own entity at that point. And then people were asking to be openers for us in the United States.
Yeah, no, I remember the Stepfather tour because that was with Gym Class Heroes, right?
Exactly.
Right. That's a trip. And Time Machine.
Right. And so Gym Class Heroes come out on tour with us. And we do about 3 nights, 4 nights, and at this point we were touring. We were touring Stepfather, but we were doing songs from OST. We were doing other stuff.
Right.
So at the end of the show, we used to do Hang Loose, and we would pull all the girls up on stage.
Right.
Well, fucking Travie in Gym Class saw us do that a couple nights, and they're the opener. They saw us do that a couple nights. They start pulling up girls during their opening act, and we're like, "Hey, man, like, what the fuck are you guys doing?" And they started stealing all of the shit from our show and incorporating it into their, act. The beatboxing, like whatever. They started doing everything we were doing and trying to do it first in the course of a night so that, like, by the time we got on stage, we weren't doing it. Then they did the video for Take a Look at My Girlfriend. And it's like, in the video, they're doing a bunch of shit from the PUTS show in the fucking video.
Word?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, some hip hop shit.
Yeah, some hip hop shit. But that actually, happened. So yeah, fucking.
So you guys are like, but nevertheless you're forging your way through. I mean, and this is like your first big, real headline
tour in the United States with a good opener,
right?
And we're selling out crowds. I mean, we're doing good numbers, and we got a record that's completely ridiculous. Like it's it has its moments where it's serious, but it's mostly a very absurd record, and it's resonating with people. And I'm tripping. I'm like, dude, what? This is crazy.
Well, with each album too, like people go back to those ones before too, and it just keeps building the name and the legacy up. But yeah, Stepfather is it's kind of an oddity in the discography
for sure. An addendum to that story is a few years later, I got a call. So Rock disappeared.
Okay,
he totally disappeared after.
And the shop is long gone.
The shop is long gone. The label ceased to exist. The Rock is in the wind. I heard maybe gambling, maybe, I don't know. Who knows? He's fucking gone. And a few years later, when Peace Lock was fully established, I got a call, and some ladies, I was like, yeah, hello? She's like, hi, is this People Under Stairs? And I was like, I'm thinking lawsuit. I'm like, no. Why? Who's asking? She's like, well, we found your number, and I have something I think you should see.
Okay.
I'm like, all right, who are you? Where are you? And she's like, I work at the front desk of the You Serve self-storage units in North Hollywood.
Okay.
And we just took possession of a unpaid storage unit. And we opened up the door, and the only thing in the storage unit is Stepfather CDs.
Oh, really?
I was like, what do you mean the only thing? And that, like, at this point, I didn't have any. Like, whatever we had sold. I was like, what do you mean there's Stepfather CDs in there? She's like, well, there's boxes that say Stepfather on them, and they're 30-count boxes, and there's probably 150 in here.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, and we're going to throw them away unless you can drive out right now and get them. And I was like, oh, yeah, don't throw them away. I'll come out right now. So I drove out there in my 4Runner and opened the back, and sure enough, we opened the thing, and they had abandoned this storage unit, had gone unpaid, and they were about to take repossession of it.
Wow.
They didn't want to auction it because they figured no one would, they did a good. They tracked me down. They found it, and they gave me all the CDs.
Amazing.
So I loaded up my car with, 3,000 full DVD original sealed copies of Stepfather, and there they are. They're over there in the corner.
Oh wow.
I've gotten, we've sold some on tour or whatever, but those wouldn't exist if they hadn't. Because other ones are like in the wind. So I still actually have stock, like dead stock of Stepfather.
That's amazing.
It's the only CD I have from another label that I actually have stock.
Right. Because all the other stuff is long out of print.
Yeah.
Everything with Elm Records
it's done.
Gold Dust.
And this is technically out of print too. It just happened that it turned up in a storage unit in North Hollywood.
Right.
And here they are.
Wow, man. Yeah, the legacy continues. Yes. Dope. That was dope. That was recorded all in his record store, and then it got too hot and we had to stop. So look forward and look out for part 2 of my conversation with Thess One on the House List. Listen, we made it to 50 episodes of the House List. If this is your first time ever listening, then go back and check out some of those episodes. First, you can hear it on iTunes. It's on SoundCloud. If you're on SoundCloud, I ask, or if not, urge you to repost it. Copy and paste the link and post it on Twitter. I'm at HouselessPod on Twitter. HouselessPod. Tag me. I'll retweet it or whatever. Get the word out. You can also find it on the Stitcher app, Google Play. It'll be on YouTube as well. Speaking of yous, I'm going to end the show with You, the closing track, or one of the closing tracks from Stepfather, since that's where our conversation on the part 1 of this chat with Thess One and Chris Portugal of People Under the Stairs. I love the song. I think this kind of personifies Mike and Chris's dynamic as a duo. Also, I just want to say too, just like going back to Thess One, incredible producer, super slept on lyricist. I love his style of writing. It's kind of like, it's just, he puts a lot of thought into it, but there's a sense of humor, and it's just his personality. It's so true to him as his personality. I love it. I love people, and I love doing this podcast. It's got me through a lot of shit, a lot of tough, challenging times, and kind of pulled me out and enabled me to be social with people after I got sick, after I had my transplant, and I couldn't do it without you. I couldn't do it without my family and friends, and I love you guys so much, and CJ Stewart, who edits and engineers this. So subscribe to this shit. If you'd like to advertise, please hit me up. You know what I'm saying? Like, come along for the journey of Peter Gostin and the House List. And I will catch you guys next one. Thank you so much. 50 episodes. Let's do 50 more, y'all. Peace.
Check it out. People in the back, you people to the side, you people in the front.
And doubles, taking the trouble, supporting labels and loving real rap. DJs do it for.
No, I be doing it, you. No, I be getting it. Be fucking to the last of my days so I can give it to.
Keep the dance floor going, be showing body movements. B-boys doing it fluid, up rocking, yo, we make this for.
Be getting busy when you be loving the P. We taking the money, ripping microphones on the stage for.
Be taking risks, fat a cap, mean streaking through the street all weekend, freaking hand styles, all city. It's
know where we from, the place under the sun, where they be packing them guns and we laid it on the one for.
Run out of money but kept digging for breaks, filling your crates, sealing history, listening to music. Cause
and everybody let's rock the party and rock the body, they created hip hop for. People in the back, you people to the side, you people in the front.
all I'm missing is you.
People in the back, you people to the side, you people in the front.
All I'm missing is you.
People in the back, you people to the side, you people in the front.
All I'm missing is you.
People in the back, you people to the side, you people in the front.
All I'm missing is you. Work 9 to 5, support family and survive the life you lead. It's for your seats to have the better one. We make it for.
Tried to down the people under the stairs, but wasn't prepared when you heard we wouldn't stop. We was coming for.
Deserve applause, girl, doing for self. Got a job here and don't need no man to step and help. I'm so proud of.
Just stay checking every time. A new sensation, a rhyme and a rhythm every time. Best made it for.
Got my back, true definition of a friend.